Ethan Barnes knocked on the light blue door for the 400th time, a paper bag of medicine in one hand and a warm loaf of bread in the other. It was 6:15. Just like always, he heard footsteps he did not know. They were fast and precise, not at all like the slow shuffle of Nancy. The door opened. Claire Bennett stood there in a dark suit, holding a phone to her ear, with her words stopping in her throat. The woman who had fired him 10 months ago stared at the man she never thought she would see again. Not in a big office, but on her own grandmother's porch. Neither of them moved. Before you go on, guess who opens that door tomorrow morning? Some answers you will not see coming. 6 weeks earlier, Fairport, Ohio, still had the smell of late summer. Ethan Barnes ran the maintenance office at Briarwood Apartments, a short brick building 3 streets over from Maple. He fixed leaking sinks, patched walls, and changed the flickering light in the stairs twice a month because the wires were older than he was. It was not the life anyone would have guessed for him. Not from how he acted, not from how he talked, being careful and precise like a man used to being heard. Nobody at Briarwood asked. He never told them. His daughter Grace was 9, missing her 2 front teeth, always drawing things in the corners of her schoolwork. Every morning he walked her the 6 blocks to the school, and every morning on his way back, he stopped at the house with the light blue door. It had started with a soccer ball. Grace had kicked it too hard in the side yard, and it rolled into the rosebed of Nancy Bennett, crushing 3 flowers. Nancy had come out to her porch, 76 years old and steady on her feet. Instead of yelling at the girl, she had laughed until she had to sit down. Ethan had come over to say he was sorry and ended up staying for coffee. That was 6 months ago. He had not missed a morning since. Nancy lived by herself. Her husband had been gone for 11 years. Her son and his wife had moved to Arizona for the winter and never really moved back. She did fine, she always said, telling people she did not need help before asking for it in a quiet way. A jar lid she could not open. A porch light that needed a new bulb. Medicine she did not want to drive for anymore. Ethan never made her ask twice. "You are too good to me," she told him one morning, watching him fix the smoke alarm. "You feed my kid banana bread every week," Ethan said. "I think we are even." The town made the friendship easy. Fairport was small enough that everyone's day crossed at the same store, the same roads, and the same diner on Route 9, where half the town seemed to eat breakfast on Saturdays. Ethan had grown up 30 miles east and had picked Fairport on purpose after everything because nobody in it knew what he used to be. Grace liked Nancy's kitchen best of all, better even than her own because it always smelled like food baking. And because Nancy let her lick the bowl without asking if she had washed her hands first. On Saturdays, the 3 of them sat at the old table, and Nancy told stories about a life Ethan only half heard, about a company her family had built. A granddaughter who ran it now was too busy, too far away, and too much like her father had been. "She calls every Sunday," Nancy said once, stirring sugar into her tea, 10 minutes at most. "The girl works harder than anybody I ever knew." "And for what?" I keep telling her. "Come see the house. I am not getting younger." Ethan nodded along the way. You nod at a story that is not really about you. He knew nothing about high-level business anymore. He wanted to know even less. Whatever office his own past belonged to, he had shut the door on it the day security walked him out of the building with his name still on the parking spot. He never talked about it. Not to Nancy, not to Grace, not to anyone in Fairport. As far as this town was concerned, Ethan Barnes had always fixed leaky sinks for a living, and that was fine by him. Some nights after Grace was asleep, Ethan looked through the boxes still stacked in the closet, items from the move from the old house that he had not finished unpacking in over a year. Tape, spare fuses, a drawer full of things that did not belong in any group. He was looking for packing tape one night when his hand felt the edge of something stiff and plastic hidden under a folder of old papers. He pulled it out without thinking, a photo badge. His own face looked back at him. He was younger and clean-shaven, with a company sign in the corner. Bennett Aerotech was written underneath in small letters. Senior Structural Safety Engineer. He sat very still on the floor of the hallway. The badge felt warm from his hand. It came back to him the way these things always do. Not slowly, but all at once. 11 years at Bennett Aerotech, the last 3 of them running safety reviews on the wing parts. The night he had found the stress numbers that did not add up, numbers that meant a group of parts had been cleared for shipping without meeting the rules. The report he had written, the meeting where his boss's face had gone very still and very serious. The weeks after when files he had never touched were marked under his name, the firing letter with a signature at the bottom that had meant nothing to him then, just a name. Claire Bennett, printed neatly above a title. He remembered standing in the parking lot with a box of desk items, watching people he had worked with for a decade suddenly find their phones very interesting. He remembered telling himself he would fight it, and then remembered the cost for a lawyer and Grace's school fees and the house loan, and how fighting a company with many lawyers was a luxury for people who still had money in the bank. He remembered, too, the quiet of that last week, the way talking stopped when he walked into the break room. The way a woman he had helped for 2 years suddenly could not look at him in the hall. Nobody had asked him for his side of the story. Nobody had needed to. A signature on a paper had done all the talking that was needed, and everyone else had simply believed what they were told to believe. He had taken the maintenance job at Briarwood 8 months later after the jobless money ran out and the interviews for engineering jobs kept asking the same question. Can you explain the gap and why you left? A question with no good answer that did not sound like an excuse. Fixing sinks paid less than 1/3 of what he used to make. It also came with no questions, and some days that felt like the better deal. He had not told anyone in Fairport any of it. What was there to tell? He had been a man with a good job, and then he had been nothing. And somewhere in between, he had learned that titles were the easiest thing in the world to take from you. Ethan turned the badge over once in his hand, feeling the sharp corners push into his palm. And then he dropped it into the kitchen trash under the coffee grounds where it would not catch Grace's eye if she went looking for anything in the morning. He did not sleep much that night. But when 6 o'clock came, he made coffee, packed Grace's lunch, walked her to school, and turned toward Maple Street exactly the way he always did, a bag of bread swinging from his hand. Because whatever that badge had once meant, it had nothing to do with the woman waiting for her groceries 3 blocks from here. Some mornings start like every other morning. This one would not stay that way. Claire Bennett had not planned on being in Fairport that morning. A board meeting had failed at the last minute. Gary Holt, her boss, said he had another meeting, which felt like a lie, and rather than sit in her office reading the same reports, she had gotten in her car and driven the 40 minutes to her grandmother's house. The way she kept promising herself she would do more often and never quite managed. She had not called first. Nancy never minded surprises. She let herself in with her key, calling out as she walked across the hall and was halfway to the kitchen when the knock came at the front door. Soft, familiar, and right on time like it always was. Though Claire had no way of knowing that, she turned back and opened it without thinking. Her phone was still at her ear while talking to Donna about a contract that suddenly did not matter. The man on the porch went stiff. She went stiff a half-second after him. Ethan Barnes, with bread in one hand, a small bag of medicine in the other, standing on her grandmother's rug like he belonged there, because, as it turned out, he did. Glare. Nancy's voice came from the kitchen, sounding very happy. "Is that Ethan? Oh, you two are finally meeting properly." Neither of them answered right away. Ethan's eyes found Claire's and held them. A silent question passed between them faster than either could have explained. How much does she know? How much do I say? Not here. Not like this. Nancy appeared in the hallway, wiping flour from her hands onto her apron, smiling at both of them like she had planned the moment herself. "Ethan, this is my granddaughter, Claire, the one I am always telling you about." "Claire, This is the young man who has been keeping me company every morning for months. I do not know what I would do without him. We, Claire started and stopped. We have met each other, Ethan said, even and calm, the same voice he used to talk Grace down from a tantrum. Small town, paths cross. Claire's eyes moved to him again, something she could not read moving behind them, and then she found her strength. Right. A few times, actually. The lie came out easier than she expected. Though her heart had not slowed down at all, Nancy looked between them, happy. She had no idea that she was standing in the middle of something neither of them had words for yet. Well, good. I have been wanting you two to meet properly for ages. She turned back toward the kitchen. Ethan, you are staying for dinner, both of you. I made too much chicken and I refuse to eat it alone for the third night this week. It was not a question. It never was. With Nancy, she was already moving back toward the stove, sure the matter was settled, humming something that neither of them knew. Claire watched her grandmother go, then looked at Ethan, who gave a small shrug. It was the kind that said, "You know how this goes better than I do." It hit her, standing there in the front hall with her shoes still on and her phone finally quiet in her pocket. How easily this house made choices for people. Nobody in this kitchen had ever asked her for permission for anything, and somehow that had never bothered her the way it should have. Claire opened her mouth to say no. She had 4 hours of work waiting for her back at the office. A call with the safety team, a dozen reasons to leave, and found that none of them came out. Sure, she said instead, watching Ethan put the bread down on the counter like he had done it 100 times because he had. I would like that. Ethan did not look at her again until Nancy had turned her back. And when he did, it was not anger in his face. It was something more careful than that, a man thinking in real time exactly how much ground he was standing on. Dinner lasted 2 hours longer than Claire had planned for, and every minute of it felt like walking on ice that might break. Nancy did most of the talking, the way she always did. Stories about Ethan fixing the porch, about Grace's drawings on the fridge, about a church sale where Ethan's bread had sold better than everything else. Claire laughed at the right times and asked the right questions and felt the whole time like she was acting out a version of herself made just for this kitchen. So, what is it you do exactly? Grace asked at one point, her legs swinging under her chair without being mean. Grandma Nancy says you work at an office. I do, Claire said, and felt Ethan's eyes on her without looking up. Boring stuff. Paperwork mostly. It was not a lie as much as it was the truth left unsaid. Ethan moved the talk elsewhere. With the easy way of a man raising a 9-year-old alone, a joke about Grace's schoolwork, a question for Nancy about her garden, and Claire found herself glad for it in a way she did not think about too much. She drove home that night with both hands tight on the wheel, thinking about every second of it. By the time she reached her apartment, she had already opened the work records on her laptop, her fingers moving over the search bar for a long moment before she typed the name. Barnes, Ethan, fired. September. The file was thinner than she remembered signing. She read it twice. Data trouble, accessing locked files, fired for cause. Her own name was at the bottom. Dated 10 months back, a choice she had made in an 11-minute meeting with Gary Holt standing near her. Sure and fast, the kind of sure that had not left room for questions. She closed the laptop without reading more. It was not enough to make a final choice. Not yet. And she told herself that was the only reason her stomach felt the way it did. She did not say any of it to Gary. Something about the file, thin as it was, made her want to look a little longer before she let anyone else see her looking. 3 streets from Nancy's house, Ethan was feeling a different kind of pressure. Roger Denning, who owned the Briarwood building, had heard from someone at the diner that Ethan Barnes had been seen having dinner with the Bennett family. The Bennett family, as in Bennett Aerotech, as in the company whose name was on half the buildings downtown. Anything I should know about? Denning asked the next morning. His arms were crossed in the doorway of the office, not quite accusing, just asking. No, Ethan said. Just neighbors. Denning let it go, but Ethan noticed for the rest of the week that his boss watched him a little longer than usual whenever he walked by. It was a small thing, hardly worth saying. And yet, Ethan found himself thinking about it anyway. The old feeling coming back, the one that had learned the hard way exactly how fast a good reputation could be ruined by a rumor nobody bothered to check. At home that night, he sat at the kitchen table long after Grace had gone to bed, moving a cold cup of coffee in slow circles, thinking about a dinner table 3 streets over and a woman he still did not know how to feel about. He did not reach any answers. He rarely did these days when it came to anything connected to that name. Back at Bennett Aerotech, Donna Reyes noticed her boss was still at her desk well past 7. A file was open on her second screen that Donna knew without needing to ask why. Donna did not say anything. She had her own reasons for staying quiet about that name, reasons that had kept her up more nights than she would admit to anyone. And for now, watching Claire read, she decided the time still was not right to change that. Claire started finding reasons to drive to Fairport. She told herself it was overdue. Nancy deserved more than 10-minute Sunday calls. And that much was true. But she could not pretend, not fully, that some part of the drive was not shaped around the hour Ethan usually came by, the light of early evening when he would stop in after his job to fix the porch or bring over a dish Grace had helped make. She watched him more than she meant to. The way he bent down to Grace's eye level instead of talking down at her. The way he fixed Nancy's door without being asked, checking it twice before he called it finished. None of it matched the words in his file. The mismatch felt wrong in her chest every time she saw him. She started noticing smaller things, too. The way he never let Nancy carry anything heavy. The way he had quietly fixed the wobbly step without being asked twice. And the patience in his voice when Grace got stuck on math and he helped her through it 3 different ways until she got it. None of it looked like a man who had been careless with secret data. It looked like a man who paid attention to things other people missed, which was, she realized with a slow discomfort, exactly the kind of person you would want looking at safety reports. One evening, cleaning dishes together while Nancy slept in her chair and Grace drew at the table, Claire found herself standing close enough to Ethan that she had to lower her voice to keep the question private. "Do you hate me?" she asked, not looking at him, her hands still in the water. He did not pretend not to understand. "I do not have room left for that," he said. "Not with a 9-year-old to raise." It was not forgiveness. It landed harder than an angry word would have. "That is not an answer," Claire said. "It is the only one I have got right now." He dried a plate, put it down, and met her eyes for the first time all evening. "You want a different one?" "You are going to have to earn it." She thought about that sentence the whole drive home, turning it over the way she turned over reports, looking for the main piece, the one line that would tell her whether the whole thing could still hold weight or whether it had already broken somewhere she could not see yet. By the time she reached the office parking lot, she had made a choice. She found Donna at her desk the next morning before either of them had taken their coats off. "I need everything on the firing of Barnes," Claire said. "Every email, every draft of that report, anything that reached Gary Holt's inbox in the 2 weeks before it happened. Do not send it through the legal team. Just bring it to me." Donna's hand went still on her keyboard for a half-second too long. "Everything," Claire repeated, and something in her voice made it clear. This was not a request she wanted to be questioned. "Understood," Donna said, and turned back to her screen, though it took her a long moment before she could make herself start typing. Donna Reyes had told herself for 10 months that silence was the smart choice. She had 2 kids at home and a house loan that did not care about her feelings. And Gary Holt had made it very clear in the way powerful men do that certain emails were better left alone. She had kept a copy anyway. She told herself it was for her own safety in case anyone ever asked the right questions. Nobody ever had until now. She found Claire in her office after 6. The building was mostly empty, and she set a folder on the desk without a word. "What is this?" "Everything you asked for," Donna said, "and one thing you did not." Claire opened the folder. On top was a printed email chain from 14 months ago, 4 months before Ethan was fired. Gary Holt to 2 junior engineers. The subject line did not say anything bad. The text did. Instructions to lower material quality on the wings by 11% to reach money targets. And a note near the bottom saying the safety office, Ethan's office, would need to be managed. 2 pages later, a second thread, Ethan's original report, the one that had gotten him fired, noting the exact failure Gary had ordered. And beneath it, a private message from Gary to the hiring office, written the same week, setting up a data case against a safety engineer who was becoming a problem to the timeline. Claire read it 3 times before she could speak. "He never leaked anything," she said quietly. "He found what Gary was hiding." "I should have said something sooner," Donna said, her voice shaking now that it was out. "I was scared. I have 2 kids and 1 income, and I know exactly what happens to people who cross Gary Holt. I am sorry. I know that is not enough." Claire looked up at her, and whatever anger had been building in her chest for the last 10 minutes, none of it went toward Donna. "You just did the hard part," she said. "That is not nothing." Donna nodded, wiped her eyes with her hand, and let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for over a year. Claire sat with the folder long after Donna left. The office was dark except for her desk lamp. The full shape of what she had done was finally clear to her for the first time. Not a mistake, not an accident, but a man's whole career taken apart on purpose with her name at the bottom of the papers. She thought about Ethan helping Grace. She thought about the porch, the door hinges checked twice. She thought about needing to earn it and understood, sitting alone in her office at 9 at night, that an apology there across a desk with lawyers eventually in the room would mean nothing compared to one given honestly face to face to the man who had spent 10 months rebuilding a life she had helped break. She sat with that thought a long time, watching the lights of Fairport turn on through her window, and understood that whatever came next could not start with a news release or a legal note. It had to start with a talk, the kind she should have had 10 months ago. Before any of this became a folder on her desk instead of a person on her grandmother's porch, she called him before she let herself think better of it. "I need to see you," she said when he picked up. "Not at Nancy's, just you." There was a pause on the line long enough that she wondered if he would hang up. "Tomorrow," Ethan said finally. "After Grace is at school." Gary Holt did not like being called to a board meeting with no plan sent out early, and he liked it even less when he walked in and saw Claire sitting at the head of the table with a folder in front of her and Donna Reyes standing quietly by the door. "What is this about?" he asked, taking his seat with the easy pride of a man who had never once thought that the ground beneath him might not hold. Claire did not waste time. She laid the printed emails across the table, one by one, letting each board member read them in silence before she spoke. 14 months ago, Gary ordered a lower safety level on the wing parts to protect money numbers. Ethan Barnes noted it exactly as his job required him to. 3 weeks later, Gary began building a case to fire him, not for the safety failure, but for a data breach that never happened. The room went very still. "This is crazy," Gary said. "Too fast. You are taking the word of a man who was fired and turning it into a lie." "I am taking the word of your own emails," Claire said, and slid the last page across the table. "Written under your name, sent from your account, dated before his firing was ever discussed." Gary's calm broke for the first time, a red color moving up his neck. He looked at Donna, and something in his face made her shrink back, though she held her ground. "You want to talk about bad behavior?" Gary said, his eyes now on Claire alone. How bad is the board going to feel when they hear their boss has been having dinner with the man she fired at her own grandmother's house every week for a month? How is that going to look in the news, Claire? Be careful who you are trying to hurt. The threat landed, and for a moment, nobody in the room moved. Then the conference room door opened. Ethan walked in, still in his work jacket, a folder of his own under one arm. He had not been asked, but Claire had told him where and when, and he had made his own choice about whether to come. "I have the original safety report," Ethan said, putting it down beside Gary's emails without raising his voice. It was filed the same week as the order to change the parts. Every point in it matches what your own engineers reported before someone told them to stop asking questions. Gary's mouth opened, and nothing came out. "You built a case against the one man who did his job," Claire said, standing now and talking to the room rather than just Gary. "I signed the paper without asking enough questions, and I own that, but the proof is in front of you. I would like the board to vote on Gary Holt's immediate leave, pending a full internal and outside safety check." The vote, when it came, was not close. Gary was walked from the building within the hour. His access stopped before he reached the parking lot. His shouting trailed behind him down a hall nobody stopped to watch. Ethan stood by the window afterward, watching the afternoon light fall across a company that had once been the center of his whole life, and felt something in his chest loosen for the first time in 10 months. Not victory exactly, but the quiet relief of finally being heard. Claire crossed the room and stood beside him, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "Thank you," she said, "for coming." "I did not do it for you," Ethan said, though there was no sting in it now. "I did it because it was true." "I know," Claire said. "That is exactly why it mattered." The internal check moved fast once it started. Within a week, Gary Holt's leave became a permanent firing. The safety board opened a full check of every part shipped in the last 18 months, and 2 separate engineering firms were brought in to check Ethan's original work, both confirming what he had found over a year earlier down to the last decimal. Claire called a full staff meeting on a Thursday morning. The room at Bennett Aerotech was full for the first time anyone could remember. She did not read from notes. 10 months ago, this company fired a man for telling the truth, she said, her voice steady, though her hands were not. Ethan Barnes found a safety problem that could have put lives at risk, reported it exactly as he was trained to, and was punished for it by someone protecting his own numbers instead of our people. I signed that paper. I own that mistake. Publicly in front of all of you, she looked out at the room, then found Ethan standing near the back, arms crossed. Grace's drawing, the one of their kitchen table, the one he still did not know Claire had seen taped to Nancy's fridge, was folded in his jacket pocket, though nobody in that room knew that detail but him. I am offering Mr. Barnes his job back at a high level, reflecting the 10 months this company owes him, along with all his back pay and a formal fix to his record. But more than that, I am asking the board to make what he did our rule. Every safety flag gets an outside check before firing is even thought about. We do not hide the people who tell us the truth. Not again. The clapping that followed was real. It came from people who had worked with Ethan for a decade and never understood why he left. From engineers who had quietly wondered if speaking up about safety would cost them the same way it had cost him. For the first time in 10 months, the answer to that question had changed in front of all of them. Someone near the front started clapping before Claire had even finished. And by the time she stepped back, most of the room was on its feet. Ethan had not expected that part. He stood very still, his jaw tight, and did not trust himself to say anything until the sound had died down. Afterward, in the quiet of the empty hall, Ethan found Claire near the elevators. "I am not saying yes today," he said. "I need time. 10 months does not go away because of one good meeting." "I know," Claire said. "Take whatever time you need." He nodded, and for a moment, neither of them moved toward the door. Somewhere behind them, the parking lot lights were turning on one by one as the day turned into evening, and neither of them seemed in any hurry to be the first to walk toward their car. That evening, they drove to Maple Street separately and arrived within minutes of each other, standing on the porch under the same light where this had all started, neither one acting anymore. I think it is time we told her the truth, Claire said quietly, her hand on the door frame. All of it. Ethan looked at the light blue door, then at her. Yeah, he said. I think you are right. He knocked once out of habit, though the door was already open. Nancy listened to the whole story without interrupting, which for Nancy was its own kind of wonder. She heard about the report, the firing, the 10 months of quiet, the dinner that had started as an accident and turned into a moment neither of them had planned on. She heard about the folder Donna had brought, the board meeting, and the vote. When they finished, she sat back in her chair and was quiet long enough that Claire started to worry. Then Nancy laughed a real laugh, surprised out of her, one hand pressed to her chest. So this whole time, she said, you two have been sitting at my table, lying to an old woman's face about how you met. Not lying exactly, Claire started. Lying, Nancy said, happy rather than hurt. Bless you both. I have been telling everyone at church what a lovely coincidence it was. My granddaughter and the nice young man from down the street. She shook her head, still smiling. Well, I suppose it still is a lovely coincidence. Just a different kind than I thought. In the weeks that followed, the evenings at Nancy's house stopped needing a plan. Claire showed up without texts, without excuses, simply because she wanted to. Ethan stopped watching his words so carefully around her. What was left once the pretending went away was something neither of them had expected to find on a stranger's porch in Fairport, Ohio. Two people who had both been knocked down by the same mistake, slowly learning to trust the ground again. Some evenings, they did not talk about the company at all. Claire helped Grace with a school project on bridges, laughing when she realized halfway through that she was explaining weight to a 9-year-old the same way she used to explain it to young engineers. Ethan taught Nancy how to video call her son in Arizona without hanging up on him by accident. A small win, Nancy told the whole table like she had cracked a code. Nobody was performing for anybody. It was, Claire thought more than once, the most normal kind of happiness she had had in years, and she had not known how much she had been missing it until it was sitting across the table from her. Grace, who had never needed the whole story to know a good thing when she saw one, drew a new picture one evening at the kitchen table and taped it to Nancy's fridge without asking anyone. 4 figures around a table: Ethan, Grace, Nancy, and new to the drawing, Claire. Her stick figure hand was linked with Ethan's. Nancy noticed it first and said nothing, just smiled into her tea. Claire noticed it second, and her throat went tight in a way she had not expected over a crayon drawing. It was Ethan who noticed last, drying his hands on a towel, and when he saw it, he did not say anything either. He crossed the kitchen, reached for Claire's hand where it rested on the counter, and simply held it. No speech, no explanation, nothing that needed to be said out loud after everything they had already lived through to get here. Claire looked down at their hands together, then up at him, and something settled in her chest that had been uneasy for 10 months and longer. Okay, Ethan asked quietly. Okay, Claire said. Ethan started back at Bennett Aerotech on a Monday in late October, 3 weeks after the board vote. In a new role, Director of Structural Safety, reporting directly to the boss, he made one rule part of the deal that Claire had not expected and immediately agreed to. Every safety concern from any engineer at any level would be checked by an outside group before it ever reached a firing talk. Gary Holt's name became a lesson in the new company book, an example of exactly what the company would no longer allow. On his first morning, Ethan still stopped at the light blue door on Maple Street. The way he had every morning for months, bread in one hand, a small bag from the pharmacy in the other. This time, when he knocked, Claire opened the door. He was already dressed for work, his hair pulled back. A second cup of coffee was waiting on the counter behind her, made exactly the way she had learned he liked it. "Morning," she said, stepping aside to let him in. "Morning," he said, and neither of them needed to act for the woman waiting at the kitchen table anymore. They ate breakfast together that day, the way they had a dozen times before, Nancy running the table with her usual stories. Grace told a story about a dream she had about a talking dog, and sunlight came in slow and gold through the kitchen window. But something had changed, quiet and permanent in the space between Ethan's chair and Claire's. Nobody said it. Nobody needed to. Nancy caught Claire's eye across the table at one point and said nothing, just smiled into her coffee, the smile of a woman who felt she had helped make something good and did not need any credit for it. Grace's drawing was still on the fridge behind her, a little curled at one corner, now 4 figures around a table that had somehow, without anyone deciding it on purpose, become real. Later, walking Grace to school, Ethan felt his phone buzz, a text from Claire. 3 words, nothing more. See you tonight. He smiled at his phone the way a man does when he is not trying to hide it anymore. And Grace, walking beside him with her bag bouncing, looked up and smiled like she already understood something he was only just letting himself believe. "You are doing the smile again," she said. "What smile?" "The one you did not used to do," she said. It was just the way kids say the truest things without trying at all, and she kept walking like she had not just seen right through him. Ethan did not answer. He did not need to. He put the phone back in his pocket and walked at her pace. And for the first time in almost a year, the walk to school felt like exactly what it was, a normal morning in a normal town with nothing left to hide from anyone. They had not gone looking for any of this. Not the wing reports, not the board vote, not the quiet mornings that turned into something neither of them had a name for yet. They had only ever been looking out for a lonely old woman on Maple Street, showing up for her one normal morning at a time. Neither of them had been looking for this. They had only been looking out for someone,